In a small southern town, couple Ted and Angie are brutally murdered while having sex down by the riverfront, and their bodies are thrown into the water. Several days later, Bob and Kathy, both young college students home for summer vacation, make plans to attend the traveling carnival on its last night. Later, Lily, a local grocery clerk at a local grocery store, feels she is being followed as she walks home. The next day, Lily visits the carnival with her grandmother Agnes, as do Bob and Kathy. Also in attendance are Sheila, a young co-ed named Walker, a waitress named Ramona and her boyfriend, Tom, and prankster Diddle and his girlfriend, Sandy. Together, the group make plans to have a bonfire near the river that night. During the carnival, Neil Marshall, a local coach whom Bob and Kathy work for, makes romantic advances toward Lily. When his jealous ex-girlfriend Sarah witnesses this, she covers Neil's car in shaving cream. Shortly after, while sitting alone in an unpopulated part of the carnival, she is shot with an arrow, and stumbles to an abandoned carousel, where an assailant suffocates her to death with a plastic bag. At nightfall, Lily drops off Bob and Kathy at their homes, and they convince her to meet them later at the river for the planned bonfire. Ramona arrives at Neil's house and makes sexual advances toward him, but he rebukes her. She leaves in tears, and is confronted by the local sheriff, Avery, who denigrates her and blames her for a car accident she was in that resulted in his son, Casey, sustaining a brain injury that left the boy intellectually disabled. Shortly after, Avery's wife phones him and tells him Casey has run away from home. Neil prepares to leave for the bonfire, but hears noises in the attic above his garage. Shortly after, Avery arrives at Neil's house and finds the garage covered in blood before a corpse falls from the rafters. Meanwhile, at the bonfire, Sandy decides to go swimming alone in the river while Ramona and Tom begin making out. While floating in the water, the corpses of Ted and Angie drift into Sandy, and her throat is subsequently slashed by the killer. Soon after, Bob, Kathy, and Lily arrive at the bonfire, and the group all decide to visit the local cemetery, a short distance away through the woods. The group begin to tell scary stories, but are interrupted by a rainstorm. Seeking shelter, the group break into a nearby abandoned house. Diddle ventures outside to use an outhouse, and the group plan to scare him. After waiting several minutes, they barge into the outhouse, but find his bloody corpse hanging from the ceiling. Walker rushes to retrieve his truck, only to be decapitated by the killer upon arriving at the vehicle. Sheila, having followed Walker, meets the same fate shortly after. Tom finds their severed heads, and falls victim to the killer moments later in the cemetery. Lily, Kathy, Bob, and Ramona are soon attacked by the killer, who breaks into the house. As they try to flee upstairs, Ramona falls through the broken staircase and is murdered. The killer, revealed to be Neil, bursts into the attic. He attempts to attack Lily, but she manages to stop him by slashing his throat with a shard of broken glass. Neil falls, but stands up again and charges madly forward in the direction of a large window. Sheriff Avery, having earlier discovered his son Casey's body in Neil's garage, arrives at the abandoned house, and watches as Neil crashes through the attic window. Avery shoots Neil multiple times in the head, avenging his son. Multiple police arrive on the scene to save Lily, Bob, and Kathy. Meanwhile, the corpses of Angie, Ted, and Sandy float in the river against the edge of a dam. A frightened woman is running down a small stream when an unseen assailant murders her. Soon after, a bird watcher is also murdered. Meanwhile, 4 friends Peter, Joanne, Ingrid, and Craig are trekking through the wilderness. Unbeknownst to them, another tourist gets thrown over a waterfall, landing near some oblivious frolickers, and his mother is wounded and dragged away. The 4 backpackers set up camp for the night. Elsewhere, a pair of honeymooners named Dick and Cherry get attacked. Dick is murdered when he exits the van to investigate a noise. Cherry, now paranoid, arms herself with a small bust. The killer throws Dick's body against one of the windows and starts to rock the van back and forth, tumbling it down a small hill where it catches on fire with Cherry still inside. The next day, the 2 couples continue their hike. Meanwhile, the killer stabs to death an artist painting a scenic view and kidnaps her young daughter. 2 wielding wild men sporting furs and rags. Peter rushes off to warn his friends, but the maniac gets to them first, slicing Craig's arm off. Craig screams, attracting Ingrid to investigate, and Joanne flees into the woods alone. Ingrid finds the campsite aftermath of Craig and Joanne and runs away. Peter later finds Ingrid at another person's wrecked camp before the 2 come across the wild man's cabin and go inside. They find several sleeping bags hanging from the ceiling and junk littered across the floor. Peter accidentally triggers a trap that reveals Craig's body wrapped in a plastic sheet. Peter and Ingrid flee the cabin. A hiker finds a stick covered in tiny metal objects and takes it. Peter and Ingrid hear the stick jingling, and Peter wounds him, mistaking him for the wild man. The killer tosses a sharpened stick into the hiker, killing him. Then, he wounds Ingrid with 2 of the spears. Before he can finish her off, Peter grabs her hand, and they escape. They walk several miles before finding a chairlift and seeing a small town, which they enter. Irrational due to guilt over leaving Joanne behind, Peter escapes from the hospital he and Ingrid are brought to and returns to the woods. Joanne finds a campsite containing a dead body and flees in terror. She sees the wild man's cabin. Joanne encounters the wild man and attempts to escape through an open window but gets hacked to death with a machete. The police form a posse that includes Ingrid to hunt down the maniac and find Peter and Joanne. The sheriff finds the cabin, where he uncovers Joanne's body, leaving Peter even more distraught. The wild man claims another victim, a man in a wheelchair who is decapitated by nightfall. Ingrid steals a machete and looks for Peter. She finds him by morning, along with the savage whom they stabbed to death in a frenzy, only stopping when the search party arrives. As everyone leaves the forest, the baby taken from the artist is shown alone in the wilderness, playing with a hatchet. On a college campus, a young male co-ed is chased and killed by an unseen assailant. Meanwhile, Joanne Murray and her boyfriend Tim attend a campus party, discussing that their dormitory, Morgan Meadows Hall, has been condemned. Along with friends Brian, Patty, Craig, and Debbie, Joanne is staying behind during the Christmas holiday to help clear the building for its impending demolition. Tim leaves for a holiday skiing trip the next day, while Debbie reveals that she cannot stay as her parents are picking her up later in the day. Debbie's parents arrive in the evening and wait for Debbie, who is searching for Joanne's inventory list. Her father gets impatient and leaves the car to find her, only to be bludgeoned by an unseen killer with a baseball bat spiked with nails. Her mother Doris is then strangled in the car with a wire garrote. Debbie finds their bodies and faints in horror. The killer drags Debbie's body behind the car and crushes her head by backing over it before driving away with all 3 corpses in the trunk. The next day, Patty sees a vagrant named John Hemmett near the campus dump site. Later that day, the caretaker, Bill Edgar, complains that one of his drills has been stolen, while Joanne muses that John took it. Joanne meets Bobby Lee Tremble, a local salesman purchasing some of the tables from the dorm. Not long after, Bill is killed in the bathroom with the stolen drill. The following day, Craig and Brian see John walking by the dorm and try to warn him away. The group plays pool that evening but is interrupted after Patty sees John peering in at them through a window. Deciding to take matters into their own hands, the group decides to search for John around the building but is unsuccessful in finding him. The group prepares dinner when Craig notices some of the missing food and sees John fleeing. While the group searches again for him, the killer smashes their dinner table with the spiked bat. Returning and seeing the mess, they call the police and report John. Later that night, Joanne hears footsteps on the dorm's roof and calls the others to her room when the power cuts out. On his way to the room, Brian encounters someone shining a torch in his face before he is attacked. Patty and Craig make it to Joanne's room, but Brian does not show up, so Joanne stays behind while Craig and Patty go downstairs to reconnect the power. In the kitchen, they get separated, and Patty is grabbed from behind and knocked unconscious by the killer, who then drops her into an industrial pressure cooker and closes the lid. Craig makes it back to Joanne's room, claiming he was knocked unconscious and that he cannot find Patty anywhere. John eventually corners Joanne while she discovers Brian's mutilated corpse in a storage room. She flees from him and makes it back to Craig. The two team up and manage to kill John. At this point, Craig reveals that he was the killer and that John knew and was trying to warn Joanne. After being chased by Craig, Joanne is shown the corpses of Patty, Debbie, and her family. Craig explains that he loves her and got rid of anyone who clung to her or ruined his chances of being with her. Joanne attempts to flee again when Bobby appears. Craig knocks Joanne unconscious before being cornered by Bobby. The police arrive and believe Bobby is the prowler the group had reported and shoot him down when he attempts to kill Craig. The police leave to obtain reinforcements and medical help, while Craig resolves to kill Joanne. With Joanne still unconscious, Craig dumps her body into an incinerator and seemingly escapes while the police outside wonder if the smoke emanating from the incinerator exhaust vent should smell so bad. During a college costume party, Peter Bennett prepares to initiate 4 new pledges into Alpha Sigma Rho. The 4 consist of Jeff Reed, a boy from an opulent upbringing, Marty Gaines, an intelligent girl from a poor background, Denise Dunsmore, a promiscuous party girl from England, and Seth Davies, a surfer from Southern California. As part of the initiation, the group is forced to spend the night in Garth Manor, an abandoned mansion once owned by Raymond Garth, who murdered his wife Lillian and 3 deformed children, Morris, Margaret, and Suzanne. Garth then hanged himself. While he had a 4th deformed child, Andrew, his body was never found, nor the body of Morris. Folklore states that Morris and Andrew still lurk within the mansion. Peter and the students lock the pledges on the grounds behind the estate's large iron gates. Jeff and Marty bond by discussing their contrasting social classes while Seth and Denise hook up. The group endures several scares that Peter, along with 2 students, Mae West and Scott Zamboni, has set up around the mansion to frighten them. Mae and Scott are murdered by an unseen assailant. Peter discovers Scott's body strung up on the roof and flees into the hedge maze, where a second assailant murders him with a scythe. Meanwhile, Seth goes to use the restroom, only to return and discover Denise missing and Mae's severed head on the bed. Panicked, he alerts Marty and Jeff and scales the gates to escape and get the police. Jeff investigates a light in the maze that he discovers is Peter's flashlight near his body. Back at the house, a figure attacks them in the bedroom, and Jeff uses a pitchfork to wound the assailant, who disappears. They remove the rug, discovering a trapdoor through which the assailant fled. The couple descends into the tunnels, where they discover Denise's corpse set at a table with the preserved remains of Garth's family members. Seth arrives at the local police station, begging for help, but the police ignore him because they believe him to be playing a fraternity prank. Seth steals a shotgun from the station and carjacks a vehicle. Meanwhile, Jeff and Marty escape the deformed Garth brothers. Seth returns to the mansion, where he shoots and kills Morris Garth. Jeff and Marty meet him in the foyer, but Andrew kills Seth before pursuing the couple back to the bedroom. Jeff urges Marty to escape out a window. Before he can follow suit, Andrew hurls him out the window, killing him. Marty enters the hedge maze, where she finds Peter's corpse and pries the gate keys from his fingers. She unlocks the gates and escapes in Seth's stolen vehicle, knocking over one of the iron gates in her attempt. Ambushed by Andrew, she drives the car into the fallen gate, impaling Andrew on its spikes. She awakens as the sun rises over the mansion and emerges from the car, stoically walking away. A 7-member gymnastics team, Annie Rivers, Sue Allen Baines, Nancy Wilson and Frank Agee, gymnastics, Joe Ward and Phil Dandridge, track and field, and Lynn Fox, swimming, at the Falcon Academy of Athletics in Brookfall, Massachusetts is up for a nationals competition. Dr. Jordan and his assistant, Diane, oversee the athletes' progress and administer them a number of performance-enhancing experimental steroids. Diane expresses to Dr. Jordan that she feels their medicalization to be unethical, but wavers as he tells her this is the culmination of his life's work. In the days leading up to the nationals competition, the athletes at Brookfall begin to disappear, first with Nancy, who is impaled with a javelin by an assailant in a black tracksuit with an obscured face. Meanwhile, Annie is struggling to balance her studies and school as well as her commitment to her athletic pursuits. Phil, her boyfriend, is a source of emotional support. As the members of Falcon Academy continue to be murdered by the javelin-armed killer and disappear, Annie and Phil attempt to uncover the source for their teammates' disappearances. Frank is subsequently injured in a training accident that leaves him with a broken leg and requires him to use crutches. While investigating the academy one night, Frank finds the corpses of the murdered students in unused lockers in the basement before being confronted by the killer, who murders him with the javelin on a staircase. Simultaneously, Annie has also entered the academy, and hears Frank's screams before being chased by the killer herself. She narrowly manages to escape the assailant, who stabs her before she is saved by Phil. Phil brings an injured Annie to Diane's training office to locate medical supplies. Unbeknownst to them, Diane is revealed to be the killer, and she quickly removes her disguise before the two see her in the office. Phil leaves to get help, assuming Diane will treat Annie's wound. Annie notices a newspaper clipping in the office detailing how the once Olympic hopeful Diane underwent a botched gender reassignment surgery and was disqualified from the Olympics due to her testing positive for a significant amount of male sex hormones. Realizing Annie has discovered her ruse, Diane, now speaking in a lower register, attacks her, revealing her motive to disqualify the competitors out of jealousy. Diane chases Annie into the gymnasium and climbs onto a painter's scaffold in the rafters, from which Annie manages to push her off. Diane falls onto a table in the gymnasium, where she is impaled to death by a competitor trophy.